Sad news to report here. The world mourning the loss of martial arts legend Chuck Norris after he was hospitalized for a medical emergency. 3 days ago, Chuck Norris's pastor stood in a room with 11 other people. What he heard in that moment will permanently change everything you ever thought you knew about this man. Chuck did not pray for strength. He did not pray for peace. He asked for something that no one in that room could have possibly anticipated. And today, for the very first time, we are going to tell you exactly what was said word for word with nothing effed out. For the vast majority of the world, Chuck Norris is nothing more than an internet meme and a star of action movies from the 1990s. He is the punchline to 1,000 jokes about superhuman strength. He is the man who can slam a revolving door, the man whose tears cure cancer, except he never cries. These jokes have been circulating for so long that most people have completely forgotten there is a real human being behind the legend. Almost nobody ever saw the side of him that only one person on this planet was allowed to witness. That person is his pastor, and his name is Tom Brown. Tom Brown served as Chuck Norris's personal pastor and closest confidant for 42 uninterrupted years. That is not a typo. 42 years. He was present at Chuck's second wedding. He baptized 2 of Chuck's grandchildren. He delivered the eulogy at the funeral of Chuck's mother. He was the first phone call Chuck made when his brother Aaron passed away. He was the last phone call Chuck made the night before his final surgery. There is not a single person alive who knew the private Chuck Norris more intimately than this man. And he is the very last person on earth who would ever fabricate or exaggerate something this serious. For years, the pastor kept his silence. Chuck had given him one very clear and non-negotiable instruction. He was not to share the contents of his final prayer with anyone under any circumstances until music after Chuck was no longer alive. The pastor honored that request without exception. He waited music. A full 7 days after Chuck's passing before he even told his own wife what he had witnessed in that room. He said the weight of carrying those words alone for an entire week was one of the most difficult things he had ever experienced in his life. The prayer affected him so deeply that he could not sleep for 3 consecutive nights after hearing it. Music, he would lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every single word in his mind, unable to process what he had been trusted to hear. The prayer was never recorded on any device. It was not read from a script. It was not delivered in front of a full congregation inside a church. It took place inside the living room of Chuck Norris's ranch in Texas, a property he had owned and loved for nearly 4 decades. The only people present were his immediate family members, his longtime caretaker, a hospice nurse, and his pastor, 12 people total. That is it. No cameras, no microphones, no audience. Just a man on his knees surrounded by the people who loved him most in the wood. 2 minutes after the prayer ended, while everyone else in the room was still crying, the pastor quietly pulled a napkin from his jacket pocket and wrote down every word he could remember, exactly as Chuck had spoken them. He did not tell anyone he was doing music this. He did not ask permission. He simply knew in the depths of his soul that these words were too important to risk forgetting even a single one of them. He kept that napkin folded in his Bible for weeks before he ever showed it to another living person. The pastor arrived at the ranch 2 full days before the prayer took place. Chuck had already stopped taking most of his pain medication by that point. His body was failing him, but his mind was still completely sharp. The first thing he said to the pastor when he walked music through the front door caught him completely off guard. He did not complain about the pain. He did not ask for prayers for his own healing. He did not talk about fear or regret or any of the things you might expect from a man in his final days. The very first words out of his mouth were these: "I have one last job to finish before I leave." The pastor had absolutely no idea what he meant. He assumed Chuck was referring to some unfinished business arrangement or perhaps a letter he wanted to write. He was wrong. He would not understand the meaning of those words until 2 days later when the prayer began. For the next day and a half, Chuck barely spoke at all. He spent most of his waking hours sitting on the back porch of the ranch house, looking out over the land he had called home for 38 years. The same land where he had taught his sons to ride horses. The same land where he had trained for dozens of his most famous movie roles. The same land where he had built a private chapel for his family to worship in together on Sunday mornings. During those quiet hours on the porch, he was writing something down on a yellow legal pad. Page after page after page. Nobody in the family was allowed to see what he was writing. When he finished, he tore the pages from the pad, walked slowly to the fireplace, and burned every single music one of them. Whatever he wrote in those final hours, he intended for it to stay between himself, music, and God. No one will ever know what was on those pages. And the family has made it clear they have no interest in music speculating. The night before the prayer, Chuck made one specific request. He asked that every single one of his children and grandchildren travel to the ranch as soon as possible. No exceptions, no excuses. He wanted every member of his family under one roof. Some of them drove through the night to get there in time. When they arrived, he greeted each of them individually. Music, he held their faces in his hands. He looked them in the eyes, and he gave each one of them a small personal music keepsake along with a handwritten note sealed inside an envelope. To this day, not one member of the Norris family has revealed what those notes contained. They have stated publicly and firmly that they never will. The following morning, everyone gathered in the living room. The curtains were drawn. The house was completely silent. Chuck's hospital bed had been set up near the window, but he refused to stay in it. He asked his oldest son to help him stand and then to help him kneel down on the carpet in the center of the room. His son resisted. He told his father that kneeling would cause him unnecessary pain, that God would hear his prayer just the same if he stayed in bed. Chuck refused. What he said next, the pastor claims he will hear echoing in his mind for the rest of his natural life. Chuck, he apologized to them. He told them he was sorry for every birthday he missed because he was on a film set in another country. He was sorry for every school play he could not attend. He was sorry for every dinner he was not present for. He told them that every award sitting on his shelf, every movie poster hanging in a frame, every dollar sitting in his bank account was worth absolutely music. Nothing compared to the time he could have spent with them instead. Several of his grandchildren were already crying before he even began to pray. The pastor gently told everyone to close their eyes. He said that Chuck could begin whenever he felt ready. For 17 full seconds, Chuck said nothing at all. The only sound in the room was his breathing, slow and labored and heavy. Then he began to cry. His family had almost never seen him shed a single tear in his entire life. This was the toughest music man most of them had ever known. The man who had trained with Bruce Lee. The man who had won World Crowdy Championships. The man who had built an empire on the image of unbreakable strength. And here he was on his knees, music, weeping openly in front of the people he loved the most. The first line of his prayer was so unexpected that half the room broke down immediately. In his entire career spanning nearly 5 decades, the pastor says he has led thousands of prayer sessions. He has heard people pray for healing. He has heard people pray for money. He has heard people pray for forgiveness, for safety, for protection, for miracles of every kind imaginable. Nothing he had ever heard in all those years could have prepared him for the words that came out of Chuck Norris's mouth. This is the full prayer, word for word, exactly as the pastor recorded it on that napkin. Father, I do not ask you to heal my body. I have already been given far more time than I ever deserved. I have lived the life that most people on this earth can only dream of. I do not ask for wealth or for fame or for any more rewards for the things I have accomplished during my time here. I know that all of those things stay behind when I leave. He paused and took a slow breath before continuing. First and above all else, I pray for the people who hate me. I pray for the people who have spoken against me. I pray for the people who wrote cruel things about me that were not true. I pray you give every single one of them peace. I pray you show them the exact same grace you have shown me throughout all of my many mistakes and failures. The entire room went completely silent. Nobody had anticipated that the first thing Chuck Norris would do with his final prayer was ask God to bless the people who had spent years music, trying to tear him down. The pastor said he almost opened his eyes out of shock. In all his decades of ministry, he had never once heard a dying person begin their final prayer by interceding for their enemies. Not once, Chuck continued without stopping. I pray for the children who will grow up in this world after I am gone. I pray that they get to learn what it truly means to be strong without being cruel. I pray that they come to understand that being a real man does not mean you never cry. Being a real man means you stand up music and fight for the people who cannot fight for themselves. I pray that they find something worth believing in. I pray that they never let anyone tell them that faith is a weakness. He paused again for merely 10 seconds to steady himself. His breathing was becoming more difficult.